Here at KFUG and Redwood Voice, Paul Kritz and yours truly, E. Corcovalis, interviewed Forester Lathrop Leonard to talk about the 1 acre fire over on Howland Hill and give an update about the fire, what it's affecting, and how it all started.
We discovered it a week ago Sunday, but suspect it was going on for almost 2 weeks prior to that, as there was a lightning storm, you may recall, that came through and started another fire in the park that we put out fairly quickly. But this one nobody noticed because it was just kind of smoldering up in the treetops for a number of days before it managed to make its way to the ground and start spreading and putting up enough smoke for people to realize it was out there.
Oh, wow. So was this a lightning strike?
That's what we think, yeah.
Huh. And initially when you discovered that a week ago this last Sunday, what was the extent of it then? How many trees?
So it was about 1 acre on the ground, and about 5 trees were burning up in the canopies. And so what happened is, one of these trees probably got on fire from the lightning, and once it started burning actively up there, embers and pieces of the tree sometimes just little embers, and other times big branches, like 100-pound branches, would fall to the ground on fire, and then that all lit the ground on fire, and it spread on the ground and even from tree to tree. And so we ended up with about 5 trees on fire when we discovered it and started actively suppressing that fire.
Oh my gosh. So I guess I hadn't realized it had reached the ground, and that's how it spread to the other trees?
Well, it's kind of a combination of spreading along the ground and then carrying up the next tree, but sometimes a little wind will blow an ember from one tree to the next, especially, the ground is pretty dry right now, so it's spreading on the ground reasonably well, but we've had that happen before where even if the ground is too wet, sometimes the treetops are dry because that's where all the wind and the sun is, right?
Oh, wow.
So
yeah.
those dry out first, so sometimes they'll spread from tree to tree without ever touching the ground.
How many people responded? How large was the crew?
So initially, it's funny, I actually was on vacation that day. I was in Portland, Oregon, on my way back
oh, man.
to Crescent City. So I missed day one, but I know that there was well over a dozen people there. There was Redwood National Park folks there, California State, CAL FIRE was there, and of course CAL FIRE is primarily responsible for wildfires on state lands. They were there. And I think may have even been a couple of people from the U.S. Forest Service that were helping out,
wow,
as well as state park people.
And I know it's got to be just the way that redwood trees are so different and such a different sort of a thing, a different sort of forest, that fighting these fires had to be different as well, right? It's not just your typical wildland fire suppression, right? There were special things you had to consider.
Yeah, this is kind of a unique situation in the redwoods, or at least quite unusual. And the trees are really tall, and some of them 2,000 years old, and very prized by us because of course there's not so many of them left, right? And the problem is they're so tall that the fire, when it gets up into the canopy, if you're standing on the ground squirting a hose, it only gets up so high.
Right.
And a lot of this fire was much higher up in the canopy than we could reach. So they did call in a helicopter to help with that, and they were dropping buckets of water on the tops of the trees, and that can be reasonably effective on the very tip tops of the trees, although, it's kind of one big gush of water, and what works best for putting out fire is kind of a steady stream because it takes a little while for the water to soak into the wood and get down to where the embers are. But anyway, we had the helicopter helping out with that. But, there's still so much of the tree between the very tip top and the bottom that you can reach with a hose. And the helicopter, drops this water, but the canopy of the tree blocks a lot of that water. So very little water reaches kind of the middle of the tree where you often have a lot of fire happening in these trees. And of course, the bark of redwood trees burns reasonably well. And when they get old, there's all kind of little nooks and crannies where dead branches and other things accumulate that are very receptive to fire. So it makes it a real challenge to get those fires out.
So you did something that I had never heard being done before, and that was install sprinkler systems. Is that correct? In the canopy of these burning trees?
That's right. We had some regular sprinklers like you would see in your yard on the ground, so that if something fell out of the tree, it fell onto wet material, so that it wouldn't start another tough fire. But then we also, needed to get water where the fire was, and so we had a series of ropes and things that were pulling these sprinklers and the typical, brass garden hose that people may be using in their yard. We were hauling a bunch of those up there, attached to hoses to help put this thing out.
Wow. Was that like ad hoc? Is this something that is commonly done, or was this just a fix that you guys made up?
Well, I don't know if anybody who's been doing this outside of California state parks. But it's something that we've been kind of developing and improving over the years, over the last, maybe 10 or 12 years or so, in parks. Mostly, we seem to have more of these down in the Humboldt Redwoods State Park area, but certainly we've been putting them out up here and within Redwood National and State Parks. As you know, this one, of course, is in Jedediah Smith Redwoods. All those, it happens everywhere, and we just, have to kind of adjust, and each fire up there is a little bit different, so that the techniques kind of change a little bit and evolve over time as we figure out what works best in each situation.
Wow, that's impressive. That's really, really cool. I can imagine, I'd be stymied just with how do I get this rope up over this tree? I have no idea how that would work.
Yeah, and even if you get it up over the tree, then there's all these branches in the way to pulling it up exactly where you want it. And so, this latest version, that we had to do on one of the trees is we got a rope up in one tree. That was pretty well placed. We were squirting away and kind of got that one under control. But then the neighboring tree was burning as well, and it was harder to get a rope into that one. So we ended up, instead of just having one rope that kind of goes up and down, we pulled the sprinkler down and tied some additional ropes to it to maneuver it. So it's a little harder to follow without looking at a picture, but if you can imagine multiple ropes tied to this one sprinkler head, the main rope is pulling the sprinkler up and down, right? But then we had other ropes that we would loop over other branches, or we're pulling them from the ground or whatever it took. So we'd have like one rope was pulling it to the left and forward, and another rope pulling it to the right and forward.
Wow.
So we can maneuver it through the woods and get it right where we want it.
Oh my gosh, man.
Yeah, and the next problem you have once you start doing that is the ropes kind of twist around each other, and sometimes the sprinkler's pointing the wrong way. So we actually ended up having a fourth rope coming off the back, and we could use that one to kind of point the sprinkler in the direction of the fire and maneuver it around to give us ultimate control. But well, I say ultimate control. That's not quite accurate, but give us more control over where the sprinkler is pointing and to do the most good, Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting maneuver, and of course, it's all these other branches on the tree are often getting in the way of all those ropes and pointing it in the way you want it to do. So it's there's an art and a science to it, I guess, to figure out the best in each situation.
Oh my gosh! So what is that situation today?
So we're down to 2 trees that yesterday we saw smoke in. We don't see active flames, but every now and again a little ember will fall out. And, as long as there's smoke up there, there's, something burning that could take off again with the next dry wind or whatever. So we're continuing to put water on these and try to put them completely out. Yeah, but the other... I say there, so we started out with 5, and then, we got down to, I think it was 3, and then, a big branch fell that was on fire and lit another tree on fire, so we were putting that one out for a while, and anyway, now we're back down to 2.
2 trees.
So hopefully those will be the last 2 on this incident, but but we'll see.
And I know this is probably a stupid question to ask, but do you have any sort of like anticipation as to how long that will take?
Well, so here's what we do. I hope that within the next 2 or 3 days we will have it out completely. And then what we do after that, this is kind of a standard firefighting trick, is that we are monitoring that fire for 3 days after we saw the last smoke. So because sometimes the smoke just kind of disappears and and then it starts going again, especially if you have like high humidity at night, but it dries out a lot in the day. Sometimes things just really kind of simmer down and then they flare back up again. So hopefully, it'll be closed through the weekend, but hopefully early next week we'll have things back open again.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you, Lathrop Leonard. Is there anything that we didn't ask you want to make sure gets said?
Well, actually, there is one other technique that I didn't get to that we use, and we use it kind of as a last resort from, a safety standpoint. Like I was mentioning, we have, big 100-pound branches and things falling out of trees, and, actually one of these trees did fall over during the incident, and so we have to be really careful about how we fight these, that we do things safely, right? So fortunately, that one that fell, there was another sprout coming off of it, so the tree and the genetics, I guess, are still there, but one of the biggies fell over. Anyway, the last resort, if we can't put it out from the ground, is we'll send a tree climber up into a neighboring tree, and then they can squirt water from there. But obviously, tree climbing, that's something arborists and other folks do. We have some folks that are specially trained in climbing trees. But, anytime you're getting off the ground like that, it's kind of a heads up from a safety standpoint. So we'd rather risk hoses than people to get up into trees, right?
Yeah. And I think the last place I'd want to be is sitting in a tree next to another tree that's on fire.
Exactly, right, with things falling out of it, et cetera, right? But, again, these are... safety is always our first consideration, but when we've got 1,000 or 2,000-year-old trees and only 5% of them remain from what was here in the pre-logging era, we do what we can to protect what's left, and that's kind of what States Parks' mission is, here to protect those resources for these and for future generations. So we're doing our best to take care of that, and providing for, obviously, safety for the community as well.
Lathrop Leonard, forester for California State Parks and the go-to guy to talk to about the fire on Howland Hill. All of us at KFOG and Redwood Voice thank you and all the firefighters working on this to keep our community safe, and appreciate the lengths you go to protect our redwoods.